so pleased to host our fabulous Congressman Tom Malinowski. We want to leave plenty of time for Tom to speak and to take our questions, but let me just remind you of a few of the great things that Tom has done lately. Earlier this week, we stood with Tom at the Westfield train station for the announcement of the resuming of the one-seat ride on the Raritan Valley Railroad. As a member of the Transportation Committee, Tom is working very hard to get the tunnels built. We don't know what we're going to call them, but he'll answer some questions about that, I'm sure. But we know that those tunnels are vital for the economic life and our day-to-day life, especially for commuters here in Union County and all across the Raritan Valley Rail Line. He's also working on the Portal Bridge, which he probably can tell you something about, and on transportation in general. Now, of course, Tom is well-versed in all of the topics that we are interested in. He introduced the SHIELD Act to prevent foreign intervention in elections, and he's yes. He has been working on so many topics, on flood control as well in Cranford. We all know this is a long-standing issue for Cranford and for all the towns along the Rawway River, and we're hoping to make some progress on that. He has intervened on our behalf with the Army Corps of Engineers, which threatened to cut off the funding. So we thank Tom for that. I don't know how he managed to have gotten so many things done already, because you're a new congressman, but we are really proud to have you here, and we're proud to have you serving us. So thank you, Congressman Tom Malinowski. Oh, yes.
So thank you all. We're going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance, and I think we're going to have Caroline and Sophie here lead us in that. All right, girls, you guys ready? Okay.
Please join us in saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, girls. You guys did a great job. Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. Can you hear me back there? I think I do need the mic, though, right? Okay. So thank you all so much for joining me on this beautiful fall day. At a moment when, I really don't know why you're here. There's not much going on. But maybe we'll find a few topics of interest. So here we are. I've been in this extraordinary job now since January, and quite a bit has happened. And some of it is encouraging. And BJ spoke about and thank you, BJ, for the wonderful introduction. You spoke about some of the issues I've been working on that affect our community, where we've made a little bit of progress. And there are other rays of hope that I can talk about, but obviously this is a troubled time for our country and for our democracy. I think we should begin. I always begin by trying to remind myself that a lot of these troubles that we are facing are not new. They are not all the cause of the current administration in Washington, D.C. We have had a healthcare crisis in this country for many, many years, and we have been struggling to deal with it in administration after administration. We made a little progress with the Affordable Care Act, but nobody can claim that any president or party has solved that problem. We've had a gun violence epidemic in this country through Democratic and Republican administrations, and nobody has done enough about it. That's not President Trump's fault. It's not his fault that we have had declining life expectancy in the United States of America for the last 3 straight years, which is an extraordinary fact for a developed, wealthy democracy like the United States. That is because of inequities in our healthcare system, the opioid crisis, other problems that we have left unaddressed for too many years. And the fact that we have left a lot of these problems unaddressed for too many years is one reason we have this problem in our politics. It's one reason why many of our fellow Americans lost faith in the ability of government to deliver for them, and why many of our fellow Americans decided in 2016, in my view, to vote for somebody whose fundamental campaign message was, I'm going to smash the system to pieces and start from scratch, because that kind of message can only take root in America if people have lost faith in the system that was set up to protect them and to serve them. And so when I think about my responsibility in Washington, it begins with what can be done to try to begin to restore people's faith in the institutions of government so that we can get back to something more normal. And so much of my time, most of our time in the House of Representatives in particular, over the last 9 months or so, has been spent trying to pass legislation that addresses the problems that people sent us to Washington to address on issues that I think Americans are united in believing we need action on. And if you see the little handouts that we passed out to everybody, they try to summarize some of the things that we have done in the House of Representatives, all of us collectively, and then me in particular, bills that I have introduced and fought to pass. You know some of these bills, I'm sure, if you follow what we've been trying to do. Many of us, including me, we ran on trying to protect the Affordable Care Act, particularly provisions that protect people with pre-existing conditions, and we passed legislation to do that in the House of Representatives. We passed legislation, the Save the Internet Act, to preserve net neutrality for the Internet. We passed the Equality Act to protect the gains that we have made in LGBT rights in this country. We passed the Climate Action Now Act to try to ensure that the United States stays in the Paris Climate Accords so that we stay on a path to protect our children's future against the scourge of climate change. We passed what we called the For the People Act, H.R. 1, the very first bill that we introduced in the House majority back in January, which is designed to protect our elections against foreign interference, to fight partisan gerrymandering and all the tricks that politicians across this country use to try to engineer the election results that they want rather than what the people want, and most important, in my view, to try to ban the dark money that has so much influence on our politics, that is one of the reasons why we keep on voting for certain outcomes in Washington and then we do not get them. And we wonder why. Well, it is because of the influence of dark money that we cannot even trace. In the last couple of weeks, we've unveiled another major piece of legislation that responds to something that I heard about constantly on the campaign trail last year, and that is the high cost of prescription drugs. This will be H.R. 3. And this is a bill that will cap out-of-pocket expenses on prescription drugs to $2,000 and allow Medicare to negotiate for the price of the 250 drugs that cost the Medicare system the most. We already have an estimate from the Congressional Budget Office that this bill, if passed, would save Medicare about $345 billion over 10 years. Not to mention how much it would save consumers across the United States of America. And we will reinvest some of that money in basic drug research at NIH. I'd rather that money going directly to drug research than going to say advertising for prescription drugs or renaming football stadiums and stuff like that. DJ mentioned infrastructure. What issue is more important to our daily lives here in New Jersey than making sure that the transportation networks that are at the heart of what makes the New Jersey economy work are repaired, replaced, improved, and that begins especially with our rail network. As we are struggling at the state level to try to fix New Jersey transit, my responsibility is to get that done. It's to get the Gateway project done. Because without it, we will lose within, a 15, 20 years. We will lose the connection between New York and New Jersey. I mean, we cannot have that. That would be catastrophic. And we made progress there. We have approved, the Congress, not just the House, we have approved money to pay for essentially the Portal Bridge, which is the first stage of the Gateway project. And in the last few months, thanks to relentless pressure from my office and others, thanks to legislation that I was able to pass, again, not just in the House, but pass all the way earlier this year, to deal with some of the bureaucratic obstacles the Trump administration has been placing in our path. We are now getting a very different story from the Department of Transportation in Washington about the prospects for the Portal Bridge. There's a grant before the Department of Transportation. We expect to get an answer in around February of next year. And for now, knock on wood, I don't count my bridges before they're built. But they are telling us that New Jersey, we have taken all the steps we need to take to qualify for that money being approved. And I will not relent until that happens. So that's all reasonable progress. We have more legislation that we've got to do. Another thing I know is of some importance to almost everyone in this room. We are going to pass a bill in the House of Representatives to deal with the cap on the state and local tax deduction. I've been helping to lead a little group of us who represent states that were the most hard hit by that horrible provision of the 2017 tax bill. It's a complicated issue because there's a lot of money involved. But we have come to a consensus as to a way forward, how to do it, how to structure that legislation. So stay tuned. We will obviously communicate with you the moment that bill is introduced. So those are just some of the issues, and there are plenty of others that I'm sure you'll ask me about. But here's the thing. When I ran, I said that I would fight as hard as I can for the interests of the people of the 7th District and of New Jersey, and I think I've been doing that. I also said I would take seriously my oath to defend the Constitution of the United States. We have to do both of these things right now. And as you know, this is an interesting moment. The House of Representatives has begun a formal impeachment inquiry into the President of the United States. This process is being run by 3 committees: the Intelligence, Oversight, and Foreign Affairs Committee. I am on the Foreign Affairs Committee. I have been in just about every deposition of a witness that we have had, in part because I feel it's my duty. I'm going to have to make a choice. I'm a member of a jury, in effect, that is going to have to weigh one of the most serious and weighty choices that a member of Congress can possibly make. And I want to hear the evidence directly. I want to have a chance to question these witnesses. I also have some expertise to bring to bear, because the facts of this case relate to the misuse of the State Department, the misuse of our foreign policy apparatus to advance the President's personal interest. And I happen to personally know many of the people at the State Department who have come before us, and so I felt I needed to be there. And I'm going to continue to be there and to communicate back to you my views as to what this all means for us. But let me share a few right now. Imagine your house catches fire. You pick up the phone and you call 911, and the dispatcher says, I understand your house is on fire. You've got a really nice house. We need a favor, though. Seriously. Imagine, you're a small business owner, and you call the small business administrator, you want a loan for your small business. And they say, gosh, we're here to help people like you. That's really, really great, but we need a favor, though. It sounds absolutely crazy, because that doesn't happen in the United States of America. But why doesn't it happen in the United States of America? Think about that. What makes us different? What makes America different from, say, Russia or Venezuela? These are countries that have elections, sometimes every year. They have constitutions, they have laws, they have bills of rights that say on paper, everybody in Russia, everyone in Venezuela, everyone in China even, you get all these rights. But it doesn't work the way it says on paper in those countries. The difference is we have built over more than 200 years a culture of respect for law. And we hold each other responsible. We hold each other accountable to play by these rules. And we know that there are consequences ultimately if people don't play by those rules, and that applies to the most powerful people among us, especially because we know that if there is disrespect for the law at the very top of an organization, whether it is a company or a college, a school, a sports team, or certainly a government, if there's disrespect for the rules at the top, that disrespect begins to permeate all the way down until, you call the SBA for a loan and somebody's going to ask you for a favor. Because if the president can do it, so can everybody else. And that's what's at the heart of this. Now, the specific story, as many of you I'm sure have read, involves the country of Ukraine, which is a struggling young democracy in Eastern Europe that got invaded by Russia a few years ago. And it has been the policy of the United States of America under multiple administrations, Republican and Democrat, to support this little country, actually not so little, to support this country, to help it achieve its democratic aspirations, and to help it protect itself against this outrageous invasion from Russia. And part of that has been we've been pushing them to fight corruption, which is a huge problem over there. That was the Obama administration policy, and you know what? It was the Trump administration policy. I have publicly said the Trump policy was even better than the Obama policy, because at one point, this president approved the sale of lethal arms to the Ukrainian military to help them protect themselves. So you had an exemplary official policy in this administration, and earlier this year, that official policy got superseded by a shadow foreign policy, run directly by the president through the former mayor of New York, Rudy Giuliani. And the purpose of that policy was not our national interest, which was supported by Republicans, Democrats, everybody else. The purpose of that shadow policy was to advance the president's personal partisan interest. He wanted two things from the Ukrainians. He wanted them to confirm a wacky conspiracy theory that it was Ukraine, not Russia, that interfered in the 2016 elections, that Ukraine interfered on Hillary Clinton's behalf, which has been completely discredited by our intelligence community, even by President Trump's own officials. And number two, they wanted Ukraine to announce they were investigating Joe Biden, his potential opponent in the 2020 elections. And not only now we know, is this what President Trump forced his diplomats, or tried to force his diplomats to ask for, thus using the State Department in his quest to get reelected in 2020. But we also know that we told the Ukrainians that they couldn't meet the president, they couldn't have a meeting unless they did these things, and now the White House has admitted that we withheld assistance, almost $400 million in aid to Ukraine, as leverage to finish what John Bolton, President Trump's former national security advisor, called this sordid drug deal. This is what's coming out in all of these interviews that we are doing. It wasn't just one phone call between the President of the United States and the President of Ukraine. It was a systematic effort over time. And I find it outrageous. I find it embarrassing that we would allow this to happen. You know, another sordid part of the story is you had all these corrupt crooks in Ukraine who hated the fact that we were pushing an anti-corruption agenda in their country. And they wanted to get rid of our excellent ambassador in Ukraine because she was actually in their face on corruption. And they realized, oh my gosh, we could enlist the President of the United States in getting rid of the US ambassador by feeding him what he wanted to hear, by feeding him these crazy conspiracy theories. And you know, that happens all the time. It's just we don't have presidents who believe that stuff, who fall for that. And so this is where we are. We are in the middle of the process. I am a very big believer in process. It doesn't matter if the president was caught red-handed, as I think he was. It doesn't matter if they've essentially confessed to all of this, as I think they have. We are going to follow due process. We are going to gather the evidence. We're going to interview everybody who was involved. We will tell the story to the American people. We will give the president every opportunity to defend himself, to send us evidence, to send us witnesses if he chooses to do that. And then, if it comes to that, we will vote on articles of impeachment and it will go to the Senate, where there will be a trial. So that is where we are. I don't want anybody, I don't care what you think about Donald Trump, I don't want anybody jumping up for joy that we are doing this. This is a last resort. This is not something to be taken lightly, and it's not something that any of us ran for Congress last year to do. But I believe it's necessary. Because again, I swore an oath to defend the Constitution and the country. This is about our system of government. This is about whether our leaders work for the national interest or their personal interest. It is about the security of the United States of America. So, I'm sure there'll be lots of questions about that, and I'm happy to take them. As somber as all of that is, I have to say, it reminds me of everything that I'm proud of our country for being. We have never been a country that is without problems. We've always had conflicts. We've always had divisions. We've always made mistakes. We've always had injustices in our country. What makes America truly great is that we have a system of government that allows us to correct those mistakes. That's what we advertise to the world. That is the hope that we leave for our children. Very few countries have this. We do. And we are showing as Americans right now that all of those institutions, those checks and balances are alive and well. Whether it's people coming to town halls to hold their members of Congress accountable, whether it's the enormous turnout that we had in the 2018 midterm elections, the highest turnout in a midterm since before World War I in America, whether it's all the community activism that we are seeing across our country, especially right here on local, state, national issues, or this process that we are undertaking in the House of Representatives, this constitutional process to ensure that no president, not just this one, but no president can be above the law. During the Civil War, near the end of the Civil War, President Lincoln was asked by one of his aides, did you ever believe that the Union might lose? This was really the last months of the war, but it was clear what the outcome was going to be. Did you ever believe the Union would lose? And his reply was, no, I never did, because there is always just enough virtue in the Republic to save it. Sometimes none to spare, but just enough to meet the emergency. That was true then. I think it is true today, thanks to all of you. And it's why I believe we're going to get through this. And we're going to get through this even stronger than we were when we got into it. So thank you so very, very much. And I'm happy to take all of you.